We have been talking of technology as what it's been doing politically, in terms of what it's been doing socially, in terms of what it's been doing emotionally. Next up is a session on what technology is doing to really deepen democracy in ways that we cannot possibly understand yet. We have two exceptional activists, practitioners of the media, people who are really, sorry, I'll just hold on till you settle down. These are two media practitioners who are using their imagination to stretch the boundaries of the media. They're using technology in a way that one would not have thought possible. They started small and they have expanded to a huge area of influence. This session is called The Tipping Point. It's presented by Mahindra Rise. And the people I'd like to invite on stage is Shubhranshu Choudhary and Stalin.
पिछले 1.5 सालों से इंडिया अनहड़ में मैं जो सामाजिक मुद्दों पे काम कर रही थी, इसका मूल्य मुझे तब अनुभव हुआ जब मैं अपनी समुदाय में एक बड़ा बदलाव लाई। इस फिल्म के कारण मेरे गांव वाले एकजुट होकर माफियाओं के खिलाफ आवाज उठाने के लिए प्रेरित हुए। इसका असर ये हुआ कि आज के समय में गैरकानूनी जंगल कटाई हमारे गाँव से पूरा खत्म हो चुके हैं।
आया है, एक टीचर आया है और हम लोग को अच्छा पढ़ाता है।
त्या तुमच्या शूटिंगचा आणि मुलाखतीचा एवढा आम्हाला फायदा झाला की आता आम्हाला 100 ते 125 रुपये रोज मिळतोय तो काढणे।
दिन खेलते थे रेत में, अब तो लिखने लगे, पढ़ने लगे।
वीडियो नयाजी इतने ऐसा फाइना होता है कि ना जनाब कमल के जी इतने वीडियो बाइक ले और चलता है।
अनहड़ का कोरेस्पोंडेंट होने के नाते मेरा किसी भी चीज को देखने का दृष्टिकोण ही बदल गया
और मुझे किसी से डर नहीं लगता है क्योंकि ये सवाल करना मेरा अधिकार है। My community people affected in so many of ways, caste, sex, religion, but when it comes to mainstream media, these things are never exposed.
उन इलाकों में जाना जहाँ कभी कैमरा नहीं गया है
और कम छोटे वीडियो में पूरे दुनिया को हिला डालता है।
ये सबसे बड़ा ताकत है मेरे लिए।
और जब सॉल्यूशन होता है, कोई इम्पैक्ट पड़ती है, तब तो किसी से नाच उठने का मन करता है।
I wanted to wait till we were all on stage to also say that we have Amita Tute, who's one of the video volunteers, one of the new generation of journalists that I think will transform the world, certainly transform India in the years to come. And we'll hear her story in a little bit. Stalin, I wanted to start with you. You know, you've set up India Unheard, this network of video volunteers. How did this idea come about? What was the genesis of it? And, you know, what has been your experience in expanding it?
Well, the genesis come from a couple of places. One is that as a documentary filmmaker, I was keenly aware of the politics of representation. Although I only make films on human rights issues, I'm deeply aware that I come from a position of privilege and power, therefore, and that I've always end up documenting human rights violations of other people who are not myself. I also, therefore, realize the immense power of media, of the ability to sort of, you know, like convolute realities if I so desired to. But there's
Stalin, may I just hold on for a minute? Can you all hear him clearly? Stalin, just put that closer because even I can't hear you properly.
Sorry, is that better? So that's all I can do. I probably...
Yeah, can you just turn up the volume there, please? Okay.
Yeah, talking about technology, it's always interesting to see how the best technologies sort of fail us at the right time. They can only imagine what happens in the rural India. So knowing the power of media on one side, and the ability of the media to portray realities, and the power of the person who's behind the technology, and the ability of that person to convolute or portray reality was immensely, I was keenly aware of that. The other side is that the mainstream media, which sort of guides the national discourses of any nation, is also something that we were looking at, and quite saddened by the fact that a lot of issues that the nation or society need to address or talk about are very interestingly missing from the mainstream media. The reasons, of course, are not to be belabored here because we know.
Can you spell out for the audience what Video Volunteers is? What is the India Unheard project?
Well, India Unheard is a program of Video Volunteers. Video Volunteers is an international media human rights organization. We train very underprivileged, socially and economically marginalized communities to tell their own stories, which otherwise remain untold or unheard because either the mainstream media is not interested in it or cannot reach out to these places. So we have about 110 community video activists like Amita Tute in 81 districts across 23 states in the country.
You know, I just wanted to expand on that. Tehelka has been collaborating with them. You get the most unbelievable stories coming in from the hinterlands where even Tehelka, with its commitment to that kind of journalism, doesn't reach. And the texture and authenticity of those stories is quite something else because people are telling their own stories, breaking that hierarchy of attention. You know, before I ask Amita to speak, I'd like you all to see a sample of a story that Amita has done as a journalist about her own community.
से लगभग 21 किलोमीटर की दूरी खूटी प्रखंड के डाड़ीगुटू पंचायत के अंतर्गत गांव डेव से 1 फरवरी 2012 को जेठा मुंडा और उनके पुत्र बिरसा टुट्टी को खूटी पुलिस ने माओवादियों को खाना खिलाने के आरोप में अपने खलिहान से काम करते वक्त गिरफ्तार किया।
गांव के लोगों ने इस समस्या पर एक ग्राम सभा की बैठक की जिसमें निर्दोष जेठा मुंडा और बिरसा टुट्टी को छुड़ाने के लिए गांव के सभी महिला एवं पुरुषों ने खूटी थाना जाने का फैसला किया।
आपते उड़ूंग लेन बात रहे आचार्य को उड़ूंग रखे ले लिया जेठे नाते इंता को खोले के लिया चिको तात भी नहीं जो कि ने हम नाते डे और लिमिता को नाते आपे पाटे उठी को आपे उड़ा को इनपे सेन की ना को मंजिन नेता ने मायांग करे और ना नेता सुपु करे
मैंने इस मुद्दे पर वीडियो इसलिए बनाया कि समाज में बेगुनाह गरीब आदिवासियों को पुलिस माओवाद के नाम पर प्रताड़ित करती है।
जब पुलिस इस तरह बेगुनाहों को प्रताड़ित करती है तो मुझे बहुत दुख होता है क्योंकि इसका बुरा प्रभाव आदिवासी समाज के युवाओं पर पड़ रहा है। मैं अमिता झारखंड के गांव सीतागढ़ा प्रखंड खूटी जिला खूटी से इंडिया अनहर्ड के लिए।
अमिता, आप हमारे ऑडियंस को बताएंगे कि जब स्टालिन जी आपको पहले कैमरा दिया तो आपका कैसे महसूस हुआ? आप जब ऐसे कहानी करते हैं क्या महसूस होता है और कैमरा मिलने के पहले क्या महसूस होता था?
जैसे ही हमारा वीडियो वॉलंटियर्स का ट्रेनिंग ख़त्म हुआ तो उसके दूसरा दिन ये घटना घटती है और ये मेरा पहला वीडियो है जिस पर मैंने वापस लौटने के बाद ट्रेनिंग लेने के बाद जब मैं घर लौटी तो मुझे एक मैसेज मिला कि वहाँ के ग्रामीणों को माओवादियों को खाना खिलाने के आरोप में गिरफ्तार किया गया है तो सो हम लोग क्या करेंगे। तो इसको लेकर के जब हम लोगों ने फैसला किया कि हम लोगों को पुलिस स्टेशन जाना चाहिए और जब हम लोग वहाँ गए तो मैंने सबसे पहले कैमरा को ऑन किया तो सबसे पहले तो डर लग रहा था कि मैं किस तरह मतलब फुटेज लूँ क्योंकि ये मेरा पहला था और उतना अनुभव भी नहीं था। पहले मैं कभी कैमरा को हाथ में ली भी नहीं थी तो मुझे डर तो लग रहा था लेकिन बाद में धीरे धीरे मुझ में साहस हुआ और मैं इस तरह से मैं वीडियो को बनाई। और इससे पहले वीडियो वॉलंटियर से जुड़ने से पहले मैं एक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में काम करते आई हूँ लगभग 2005 से झारखंड जंगल बचाओ आंदोलन करके, जो आदिवासियों को जंगल पर, जमीन पर अपने अधिकार को स्थापित करने के लिए विशेष करके उसमें 4 खंभे हैं। पहला है गांव सभा, दूसरा है ग्राम सुरक्षा जंगल सुरक्षा समिति, और तीसरा है महिला सहकारिता समिति, और चौथा है बाल अखाड़ा, जो बच्चों का एक समिति है जो नौजवान युवक हैं उनको संगठित करके एजुकेशन के बारे में, हेल्थ के बारे में, कल्चरल के बारे में और लीडरशिप के बारे में हम उनको ट्रेनिंग देते हैं, बताते हैं।
तो अमिता, ये कैमरा मिलने के पहले, आप पत्रकार बनने के पहले, आपको लगता था कि आपका आवाज़ कोई सुन नहीं रहा है, आपका समस्या में कोई दिलचस्पी नहीं है, आपके मुद्दे जो है हम जैसे मीडिया उस पर कभी फोकस नहीं करते हैं, आपको लगता था कि आपका आवाज़ नहीं सुन रहा है कोई?
ये तो मुझे लगता था, क्योंकि किसी भी समस्या को लेकर के जब हम लोग आवाज़ उठाते थे तो पेपर में भी एक छोटा सा देता था, तो मुझे उसमें संतुष्टि तो नहीं लगता था, क्योंकि अपना तो मेरा नहीं है कि मैं उनको मतलब थोड़ा बढ़ाऊं। तो मैं कभी उम्मीद भी नहीं की थी कि आज मतलब इतना दूर तक मेरी आवाज़ को नेशनल लेवल तक पहुंचाया जाएगा, और एक अच्छा मौका है जो कि कैमरा मेरे हाथ में आया, तो मैं आप सभी लोगों के सामने अपनी जो समस्याएं हैं उनको मैं आज पहुंचा पाई हूँ।
स्टालिन, बिफोर आई कम बैक टू यू, अमिता, एक और प्रश्न कि आपका गांव में लोगों आपको क्या नए दृश्य से देखते हैं, नया सम्मान देते हैं?
गांव में, क्योंकि मैं एक आदिवासी समाज से हूं और विशेष करके हमारे गांव में हमसे पहले कोई इस तरह के सामाजिक कामों में भागीदारी नहीं लेते थे, मतलब अपने गांव से बाहर नहीं निकले थे। मैं ही एक ऐसी हूं जो कि आज मैं समाज में अपने लोगों के लिए उनको इकट्ठा करके उनको जागरूक करने का मैं काम कर रही हूँ।
Thank you, Amita. Stalin, could you, 2 questions before I come to Shubhranshu. Can you tell us about some other stories where video volunteers has been able to empower people, and is it beginning to have impacts? Does the administration respond? Does the national media respond? How can you make this voice heard more now?
Yeah, so sure, we have many cases of impacts, but before that, the effort is not just that people like Amita could go out and document human rights violations or entitlement violations that are otherwise not covered, but for every video of the 800 odd videos that we've made in the last 2.5 years, for every video, we have an impacts manager in the office who sits and writes an impact strategy that how do we begin to solve this issue where these videos can be presented as testimonies or evidences. And then they are not just video makers, they are activists as well. So they go back to their communities and do large-scale community screenings on screens like these, mobilize communities to action, go back to the government officers and show them as evidences that this is what is happening and try to solve those issues. When the issues are solved, we also tell them that they need to make videos on that and on those impacts. So if you go on our website, you can also see a bunch of impact videos. Some of the impacts that we have had is for 2 years in Jharkhand, 4 teachers were not paid for some reason. We made a video, showed to the collector, and in about few days or few weeks, 90,000 rupees each was sort of sanctioned, and then subsequently just now getting salaries. In Gujarat, for 3 months, there was a big issue of fluorosis in water. The water treatment plant was not working. The video activists on the ground and the team, the video volunteers team in Goa, put so much pressure on the Vasmo team in Gujarat that they had to install the treatment plant in about 3 months. So there are several impacts like these that can happen, but my observation is that if we are documenting entitlement violations, where we know that you ought to get this, but we're not getting it, and you produce an evidence on that, and then if you have sort of cooperative bureaucrats, then it's easy to find solutions. But for structural issues like caste violations or like insurgencies in Manipur, where there are results of much deeper structural political issues or social political issues, then we need to launch campaigns. And one such campaign that we've launched is Article 17, where we are documenting practices of untouchability practices across the country. There are 28 videos online right now, and we're petitioning the National Commission of Scheduled Caste. We're filing a public interest litigation in the Supreme Court. The idea is that we have spent a lot of time in this country talking about untouchability practices as a matter of social traditions and cultural traditions. It is time that we look at the practice for what it is. It is a criminal offense. It's a criminality.
Yeah. In fact, I'd like to share with you all just snippets, actually, snatches of 2 other video volunteers' work from different ends of the country.
In Manipur, you perhaps think that there is only one organization behind this. In Manipur, there are dozens of insurgent organizations, all of who demands a separate state, and some even demands a separate country. According to Commander Khaling, the United Minority Liberation Army use guns as a way of protecting themselves from other armed outfits that are threat to the minority people. He believes that after they have taken up arms, violence against them have decreased as their opponents are now scared of attacking them. This is the first time that United Minority Liberation Army has agreed to speak with any media or show their activities to the world. They agreed to talk to me because I belong to the same region, and so they trust me to tell their story in a correct manner. I am Daniel Motte, reporting from Harman Camp in Manipur for India Unheard.
आपका नाम सुनते ही सबके जहन में यही आता है कि यह देश का, भारत का सबसे संपन्न राज्य है और यहाँ के जो दलित हैं और पिछड़े और गरीब हैं वो भी प्रफुल्लित होंगे, लेकिन ऐसा नहीं है। यहाँ पर गरीबों, दलितों, पिछड़ों की हालत बद से बदतर है और ख़ास तौर पर यहाँ पर जो मेरा समुदाय है और ख़ास पर तो मेरा समाज है और ख़ास तौर पे जो वाल्मीकि समुदाय है वह नंगे हाथों से काम करने के लिए मजबूर है, यह अमानवीय कार्य करने के लिए मजबूर है। गंदगी से कई बार गैस चढ़ने से या अन्य जो गंदगी होती है मलमूत्र अंदर मुंह के अंदर जाने से इन लोगों की, मेरे समाज के लोगों की मौत भी हो गई है। ऐसा ही वाकया अभी हाल ही में सामने आया जहां पर 2 लोगों की मौत हो गई है।
These were snippets of 2 other India Unheard journalists. And I just wanted to put emphasis on that story about the manual scavenger, the sewage cleaners. Anand Patwardhan, like you, has just made a film about the Dalit community. And there was a very powerful story there, a vignette about a municipal cleaner cleaning our garbage. And he said that the municipality commission refuses to give them gear, not even masks, not boots, not clothes, not gum boots. And he said that although it might cost them 2,000 rupees to give that to us, they went to the High Court to fight against giving that gear rather than just giving that to the workers. And I know that in the national media, none of us focus on stories like that. We have no time or space for it. Recently, there was a story from Manipur, because this journalist spoke of a Manipur story, about a killing, a series of photographs of a young man being shot dead by the Manipur commandos. And I know that it went to a lot of people in the national media. People refuse to carry it because they feel that there's no interest in Northeastern stories. I hate to say it, but Tehelka did. We put it on the cover. It became a Manipuri outrage. And since then, there has been absolutely no extrajudicial killings. That is the power of a story. And I hope that these journalists will bring these stories to us. Stalin, I'll come back to you. But before that, Shubhranshu, and before we show a bit of your work, I wanted to ask you too. You know, you were working with the BBC, and you've been a mainstream journalist.
The high priests.
The high priests.
Yes.
What took you elsewhere? What was your trigger? You know, why did you start to begin to create this network of grassroots journalists?
I never believed in what these people do. I thought we did the right thing. As you said, I worked in BBC for 2 decades, and while being the South Asia producer, I covered almost all the wars. I used to call myself a vulture journalist, going from one war to another war. But when a war started at my home, I come from Chhattisgarh. as you were yesterday talking about death of Tarun, that made you understand that malaria is a story. When I started looking at, I grew up in a tribal area, and there was only one school, and I studied with tribal boys and girls. And this 25 years, that quiet place, that beautiful area, as our Prime Minister calls, had turned into India's biggest internal security threat. And all those backbenchers who I studied with, they were never the fighters. The Chhattisgarhi tribals, they're not martial race. They're not like Nagas or Manipuris, what we saw. My journalism, with best of resources, BBC at that time, it did not answer me many questions. I did not understand what's going on. I did not understand what has gone wrong. All my classmates, why, how they became the biggest terrorists. And I went to understand. I spent time with them, and what I understood, and this was the answer. I'll tell you more.
Yeah, can we just see a sample of Shubhranshu has started a network called CGNet. It started out as Swara, while Stalin has helped grassroots workers get videos, and it's doing splendid work. That still requires a huge amount of resources. Shubhranshu was thinking of ways of getting people's voices heard, even without having a video camera, and how can one go about that? We'll see a sample of that before we talk about it.
यहाँ की जो बड़ी पंचायत है वो अपने मोहल्ले में पक्की रोड बनवा लिए हैं और इधर आदिवासी लोगों की खोरी में जो लोग वहाँ से गुजर कर अपने घर जाते हैं, घर में होने वाले कूड़ा करकट उनके रोड में ही फेंक देते हैं।
हम इसी गांव में पिछले 25 साल से जीवन करते हैं। हम छत्तीसगढ़ से यहाँ आए हैं। इसी गांव जाने के लिए अभी तक कुछ रास्ता भी नहीं है। हमको वोट कार्ड नहीं है और रेशन कार्ड भी नहीं है। पीने के पानी के लिए हमको बोरवेल चाहिए।
और हमेशा बैंक क्या करता है कि एक हाथ खड़ा किए रहता है कि हमारे पास पैसा नहीं है। यहाँ की अर्थव्यवस्था पूरी तरह से चौपट होती चली जा रही है। इतनी सारी फोर्सेस भी यहाँ पे डिप्लॉय करी गई हैं, जिनके खाते में सैलरी तो है लेकिन वो अपने खाते की एक पैसा निकाल नहीं पा रहे हैं।
हमारा गांव में बहुत दिन के पहले पीने के पानी का बोर खराब हो गया है। बहुत दिन से हम इसी विषय पर मंडल अधिकारी लोगों को शिकायत किए, लेकिन अभी तक इसी बोरवेल को कोई नहीं ठीक करते हैं। हम बहुत मुसीबत से पीने के पानी के लिए बहुत दूर पैदल से जाके पानी ला रहे हैं।
किसानों को जमीन के बदले जमीन दिए बिना बांध में पानी भर दिया है, जिससे किसानों की खेती की जमीन डूब गई है। कल गोगल गांव के सत्याग्रह की मांगों को सरकार ने माना, परंतु इंदिरा सागर और बरखालिया नाम के एक गांव में अभी सत्याग्रह जारी है।
मैं आज प्राथमिक उपचार केंद्र पर खड़ा हूँ। यहाँ पर ये 2001-2 में बिल्डिंग बनकर तैयार हुई है। आज गांधी जी की जयंती है। यहाँ पर जनता की मांग है कि यहाँ पर प्राथमिक स्वास्थ्य केंद्र में डॉक्टर नियुक्त कराया जाए और सड़क कर्मचारी यहाँ पर नियुक्त कराया जाए। मैं धन्यवाद जगदीश।
कमलाबाई बैगिन का 4 एकड़ 40 डिसमिल जमीन है, जिस जमीन में कुटकुटा के संतोष गौड़ ने जबरन काबिज कर रहा है। कमलाबाई ने धान बोया था, जिसके ऊपर संतोष गौड़ ने सोयाबीन राहेर बो दिया। हर बार थानेदार परेशान करता है। एक बार 500 रुपया और मुर्गा लिया। 29 सितंबर को फिर एक्का साहब ने 50 रुपए लिया।
अच्छा, वो कितना पैसा देगा बोला था आपको? 12,000 महीना पैसे बोला था। और यहाँ पे कितना दे रहा है आपको?
जब पैसा मांग रहे हैं तो हम लोग से हाथ सफाई कर दिए हैं, मारपीट कर रहे हैं। इसके लिए हम चाहते हैं कि आप कुछ हम लोग का सहायता करें और हम लोग का यहाँ से निकलने का बंदोबस्त करें।
I'll ask you to turn that down so that we don't run out of time. Shubhranshu, again, before we talk about how it came about and how you finance something like this. Do tell our audience how CGNet works. What do these voices mean?
You are an exception, but we journalists are normally...
Do speak a bit louder, Shubhranshu. I'm not sure if they can...
I'm saying Shoma is an exception, but we journalists are normally uneducated people. We call ourselves...
Where did you make me an exception?
Chimpanzee-style learning. I would like to first tell you how this idea came, and I will try to be a bit educated. I'm listening to educated people in last 3 days. Can I have the first slide, please? When I am talking to you, like we are talking in a group, in a small place, and this is what I learned from my friends who have become the biggest terrorists, and they said, sort your communication. That is the problem. You're getting all your stories wrong. This Maoist story, they said it is not a Maoist problem. I will explain it a bit. So they said, when we sit in a village like this in a circle, and air is the medium, then communication is democratic. Then you have equal right, I have equal right. But what happens when we get developed? Can I have the second slide, please? Then what happens? Some people go up, yeah? Community remains at the bottom, but because we're not sitting in the same room, we need a machine to speak to each other, to communicate. So medium, and that medium or media is owned by that small number of people. That machine, that mic, that is Times of India, that is media. And when a small number of people own the medium, which when it is air and is not owned by anyone, that's where the problem comes. They said it is not a Maoist problem. I said, what do you mean by that? I've been covering your story. I've done half-an-hour documentary. I've met your, Mr. Ganapati and all that. They said, yes, there are Maoists. There are 5 Maoists. And there are extremists in every society, of this side and that side. But no problem becomes biggest problem unless big majority of people join them. And we have not joined them because of Maoism. You can't be more communist than a Adivasi. They are more equal than all communists. We are joining them. It's a historical accident that they came to us and they started talking to us. They have an agenda and we have some problems. But the problem is there's a break of communication between you and us. You don't talk to us. If I speak, you can hear. There are many good officers. There are many good journalists. And today, my AK-47 is talking to your AK-47 because we are not communicating. So democratize your communication. I said, what do you mean by democratize your communication? They said, wo jo gola hamara hai, that circle as we sat and talked, where, okay, all the 5 fingers are not equal. Somebody speaks less, somebody speaks more, but everybody has equal access. Create a communication platform. Your media has become messenger. It has become like Asaram Bapu. It's one way, top down. You guys know everything. Let everybody speak. So that's where we started looking at, can technology help? So if you look at politics, we had the same model before 1947. Small number of people decided what is good for us, as we do in journalism today. You and I, some of us sitting in places like Ranchi and Raipur, we decide what is news. And when we decide that Amita's problem is a problem worth reporting, then only she will be heard. And in places like Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh, where the 20% who own this media, their interest, and the 80% who do not own the media are in conflict, these messages will never come out, will never get reported. So we tried to look at, can there be a platform? And that's the experiment CGNet Swara is. So can we sit in the same circle? Though we don't live in the same circle. He lives in Goa, I live in Delhi. And we want to communicate because we want to remain a community. So majority of us now have a tool, mobile phone. And all of us have voice. we may speak a different language, and we were talking about Jugaad technology. So we have not invented anything. We are using simple technologies. We use IVR system, the same leave your answer message after the beep. So now what we have done, that okay, a girl lives in Dantewada, I live in Delhi, and we are a community. We are X number of people. We want to communicate. We want to tell each other's story. Now what she does, all these voices you were hearing, they pick up their phone, and there is a server in the middle. That's computer, that's internet. And we have just simply connected that to a phone. So when the person calls, the message gets recorded. If it needs translation, we translate it. We cross-check, verify it. As soon as it's okayed, it goes to people, those who are on internet, through Facebook, Twitter, just name it. Those who are on mobile phone, they receive it on mobile phone. And rest, who don't even have mobile phone, can receive it on radio. So that's a small experiment we are doing, and that is helping solve India's biggest internal security threat. They said, yes, there are Maoists. You'll have to solve the Maoist problem. And there are us. We have also problem. Don't mix them up. Don't send army. You kill 5 of us, another 50 become quote-unquote Maoists. And we are mixing it up. So what we did with politics in 1947, at that time also, if you look at New York Times, Washington Post, they said it's madness, it's harakiri, it's suicide. How can a country, how can people decide? They're not educated. How can they be deciding who will be the prime minister? So what we are talking today, what we are doing in Chhattisgarh and what Stalin is doing, it may sound very unrealistic, it may sound absurd, but time has come that we need to democratize communication. If we want a better political democracy, we are hearing about Syria and Egypt, people are fighting for democracy. Of course, democracy has many problems. We need a democratic communication platform.
Yeah, I have just 5 minutes. I'm going to ask you both one question, which is the financing of this, and you, Shubhranshu, also to tell us just what is the volume of calls that are coming in, because the volume of calls triggered by one man, his wife, his son, and Stalin's wife, Jessica, also works with them. Just 2 people have triggered a ripple effect of voices and stories that you would have never heard while the hierarchy of attention was being decided by us in Delhi and Bombay. But what does it take to finance this, Stalin, and how difficult is it to do this?
It takes that simple thing called money. And we find money through, because we are a non-profit, we find money through conventional non-profit funding, which are large organizations and funding organizations, primarily funding human rights work, some funding also alternate media work. We also believe that there is a business model here, because ultimately we are 110 people now. We intend to be 250 people in 250 districts, and eventually in 650 districts, which is the entire country, in each of the districts, which will make us not only India's but the world's largest news network, not just in the mainstream sense, but also a news network, and proud to say news network entirely formed of communities who live the issues they are reporting, not like people like us who are detached from those issues. And if we look at from a business model, we can give probably at 1/20th the cost, the same news that mainstream media probably spends to send a reporter to
In fact, what you're saying, Stalin, is so valuable, because the truth of the mainstream and corporatized media is that everyone's pulling back on having reporters, on sending people to ground, because it's become too expensive.
Exactly.
And stories are just done mostly out of headquarters.
Right.
Today, what you're doing is counterintuitive to what the national media is doing. And it's
therefore becomes more important, because as we all know, mainstream media is retrenching people, which means that the better media also is not finding the resources to send that sensitive, sensible journalist to cover some issue in Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh, which means that even more there's a requirement for people to create their own content. Otherwise, there's complete death from the mainstream media of these issues. I just want to make a slightly different point on Maoists here. I was just earlier mentioning to some friends that if this meeting, this conference, was to happen in Chhattisgarh or Jharkhand or parts of Orissa or Madhya Pradesh, and if the profiles of people sitting here were like Amita and names like me, like Stalin, and we were discussing the issues that we're discussing right now in some of the panels, we would all be booked and tortured for being Maoists. That is the reality. If I change this setting, we will be Maoists. I can sit in Grand Hyatt in Goa and talk about Maoists because there's a democratic space here and the police dare not enter here. I know an intelligence officer here roaming around every day. That same intelligence officer, if I shift the location to Ranchi even, he will start behaving very violently with me. That's the reality that has to be told.
Yeah.
And I think, as Shubhranshu mentioned, the high priests, even the media behaves in a very feudal casteist manner, where we believe that certain journalists of a certain training and certain, of course, caste and even gender at times, gender is now breaking, they have the right to tell stories on behalf of other people, which means that we have created a system where we are constantly relying on the sensitivity of an individual journalist to report on a story. In Tehelka's case, sensitivity of collective of individuals. But that's not the apt solution for this country, or any countries. We need people living the issues, telling their own stories. You may dispute the story based on factual inaccuracies. We also train our people to be subjective, not objective. We tell our people that, tell them that this is my story, this is my neighbor, myself suffering this. You can dispute the facts, but not the emotions and the experiences that they've gone through. I think we are not only inverting the pyramid of communication, but we are also subverting the very way in narratives are constructed. Unless we start to accept the problems, we are not going to begin to see the solutions. Unless we change the profile of those producing the content, content will not change. Yeah.
Shubhranshu, we have just 1 minute left, but also to talk about the efficacy of this. You know, we believe that we have structures today that are completely unresponsive, that our polity has become one of despair. Do share with us some of the responses of the administration to CG Swara and how it's turning around.
Shall I answer the finance part first?
Oh, okay.
Let's pitch it.
Gandhiji was once asked that, you will be thinking, what's finance with Gandhiji? What is your nation?
Speak louder. Yeah.
And he had answered, ki ek bail gadi, ek bullock cart, the distance it covers in a day is my nation. What he was trying to say is a group of, say, 30 villages in a 30-kilometer radius. These villages can be interdependent and they can help each other. Kisi ke yahan lauki zyada hoti hai, somebody grows more rice, somebody grows more. These villages, can we create a independent, sustainable communication model for them is our financial goal in future, that we call it temple model. Say, to build a temple in a village, you don't need any World Bank funding. If people understand that they need this, and if we can't make them understand, it will remain a project, what we are doing, and it will nowhere change things. If they understand that there is no free lunch. If somebody is paying 48 rupees or 148 rupees for a newspaper, which we buy in 2 rupees, that person or that group of people will decide what goes on that newspaper, not Amita. They will do it themselves. Our work is to make this with the help of technologists, and that's what my request to all the technology people here. We need to make technology so cheap that they can run it, they can own it. And then if we have these kind of small units of communication, this will be like Facebook for poor people. Okay, they will be talking many things which will not make sense, but some things which will be news. And that will be the bottom-up model. If there are 100 villages or 100 groups, if 70% of them are talking about water, that is new, not what Shah Rukh Khan was doing last evening in the Goa beach, which we decide.
But on
just
times,
to end, sorry, Stalin, I'll have to cut this. Just to end, you know, Shubhranshu was telling me when we were talking earlier that even the CRPF has begun to listen to the CGNet. And as they hear stories, they are great district collectors, they are good men, good women within the system who are just so grateful that they are beginning to hear that the soundproof rooms that we live in are being penetrated, they are being broken, the silos that separate us are being broken. You know, what Stalin said, that people say that, you know, what we are fighting is a different reality. In my own circle of friends, in media debates, TV debates, people say, but why are the tribals so anti-democracy? Why are these armed people fighting democracies? And I keep saying that the democracy that they are fighting against isn't the democracy that you and I experience. They are experiencing another state altogether. They are not against the Indian state that you and I are part of. The Indian state that they see, and that's the point Stalin was making, that if we were all gathered in Jharkhand, in a little village, this conversation would be about something else also altogether. And that's why in Sarkiguda, Kamla Kaka's village gathering in the middle of the night became something that was worth shooting. But a Bob Geldof concert in the middle of the night will never scare a CRPF battalion that is passing by. Absolutely. We live in two different continents. This is one country, but we are two different continents. And both these people are helping the continents begin to speak to each other. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners, we shall
बंदूक इस्तेमाल नहीं की, मेरा हथियार था सिर्फ